Hey YouTube, it's me, BrandonColonel. The next knife review that I have is on the Kershaw Emerson collaboration, the CQC7K, or as the other name that it goes by, because for whatever reason this particular knife has two, it is the 6034T. T just simply meaning tanto, because this does come in a drop point variation. Now, the knife itself has a pretty good detent on it, so you can flick it out very easily. But being an Emerson, it does have the patented wave feature, which I will demonstrate for you right now. Works very well. It goes in your pocket tip up only, but it is reversible to left-hand carry. And as you can see, the wave feature works very well, just as any Emerson should. It is the fastest opening mechanism on the planet for knives. I have yet to see any system that opens a knife any faster than the wave feature. Because opening a knife on the draw stroke, basically without having a fully automatic out the front, I don't think that there is a faster opening mechanism on the planet. But even then, having an out the front automatic is going to be a little bit more dangerous, because if you try to get it out any faster than with a wave feature, you're probably going to end up stabbing yourself first. So yeah, this is the safest and fastest mechanism that I've ever seen. It does have the G10 scale on the front, but it's nowhere near as strong well, not strong, I guess I should say. It's nowhere near as grippy as a real Emerson. Now, I'm going to get this out of the way right now. I've never actually personally handled a real Emerson, but I've seen enough videos on them, and I've heard of enough people who have them that I can just tell you point blank, this is nowhere near as grippy, because this is almost smooth to the touch. Like, you can tell there is a grit to it, but it's just nowhere near as smooth. The kind of stuff that I've heard about a real Emerson, you can pretty much use it as an emery board. The frame lock is not titanium as I've heard some people thinking. This is just stainless steel. But personally, I think that's going to be a little bit better. And before people start calling me out for heresy, saying how they prefer titanium frame locks over stainless steel frame locks, titanium wears down pretty quickly. And whereas stainless steel frame locks, it's going to be a lot harder to wear down against the stainless steel blade. So stainless steel against stainless steel, you've got a pretty similar hardness there. So therefore, the stainless steel frame lock is going to wear down a lot slower than a titanium frame lock. Let me actually compare it to an actual titanium frame lock I own, the ZT0561. When I first got this thing, the lock bar was probably at maybe 30 to 40%. It really wasn't all that much. It was a nice and early frame lock. This one started off at 100%, and I got this basically just this past Sunday on National Knife Day. But this has not changed any bit since I got it. Whereas this knife, about the same time in, and I was already noticing that the frame lock was already starting to inch over. It really didn't take all that much playing with it before I could already just tell this lock was moving. I mean, it was about a week and I was already noticing something. This knife, I've had it for a week. It still hasn't changed. The lockup on this is still just as perfect as the day that I got it. And I'd pretty much be willing to bet money that 2 to 3 months down the road, this lockup will still be the exact same as the day that I bought it. And I compare it to another stainless steel frame lock that I have, the Kershaw Cryo. this lockup is still not even 100% yet. This one started off at 100%. This one, I'd say this is about 90% right now. And I've had this for almost a year. And I've put this through its paces, so it's seen quite a bit of use. I've played around with it, I've used it, I've hard used it, and it's still not even at 100%. This knife, I haven't even had it for an entire year yet. And guess what? This thing still is much, much more worn than any other frame lock I have. I got this sometime in second semester of last year. Well, of this year actually. And it's already worn substantially so. We had both of my stainless steel frame locks. I'm pretty sure these are going to outlast it in terms of lockup. Because this one hasn't moved at all. I may have only had it for a week, but it doesn't even show any signs of moving. I've had this for almost a year now. I've got maybe 2 months to go, and I'll have had this thing for an entire year. It's still not even at 100%. 100% lockup, because this is a terrific knife. And guess what? It's a stainless steel frame lock. So for anybody who's thinking that just because this knife has a stainless steel frame lock, it's somehow inferior to any titanium frame lock, personally I prefer a stainless steel frame lock. Because titanium is softer, it may be more expensive, but it's softer. It wears so much quicker. Sure, there's the argument that you can do so much more with it, but honestly, as far as what it actually does, it's inferior. It doesn't keep the... how should I put this? It doesn't keep the same lockup quite as easily. It wears so much quicker. The only thing going for this is that you can do a little bit more with it. You can anodize it. I'm not entirely sure that you can anodize stainless steel. Now, correct me if I'm wrong about that. I would love to know if you can. But just because I like to know about stuff like that. Not exactly saying I can do it. But you can anodize titanium. Honestly, that's really about it. That's really all you can actually do that's more with titanium. So you can anodize it. So if you can anodize stainless steel, I really don't see the big craze with titanium. It's just the craze of having titanium over having stainless steel. Really don't see the benefit. So yeah, I would actually prefer this stainless steel frame lock over any titanium frame lock any day. But so, more about the knife itself. It has a stone-washed grind with a satin finished flat. So stonewash here on the tip and this top swedge that's taken out, and then right here on the flats, and also right in here, it's actually been satin finished. It has a manual thumb disc, which, as you guys have been seeing this entire time, functions very well. Now, I will tell you this, it does need a bit of a callus on your thumb if you're wanting to play with this thing all the time. And so, yeah, just be aware of that. It's going to hurt for a little bit until you get a callus on your thumb. Because also, the jimping on the inside right here, that's a little sharp and it can get annoying. and that'll probably cut up your thumb just as much as that thumb disc will. Also be aware that out of the box, the pivot might be too tight, and you might not be able to get it open quite as easily as this. Loosen it just the slightest little bit, and that's all it'll take, and I guarantee you it'll flick open like a dream, which this is also incredibly smooth. So when you're closing it, be careful to not go down the entire way, because it's very likely that with just how smooth this is, that you could just go too fast. So just get in the habit of only closing it part way, getting your thumb out of the way, and then closing it the rest of the way. Okay, the jimping on the back right here, it's there, but it doesn't really do that much. It basically just offers the slightest little bit of texture, but just like I said, to be perfectly honest, it really doesn't do that much. It's just there. It offers more protection going forwards than it does backwards, but even the forwards protection, the jimping just doesn't really do all that much. You can really skate around pretty easily there. Just me personally, I can't seem to get a full mirror polish on this knife edge as I can on some of the others. Say my 561, just for instance, since I have it here. This one I've got a pretty nice polish on it, but for whatever reason, the CQC7K, I just can't seem to get that same polish on it. Now, don't get me wrong, it does accept a pretty nice polish, and let me get out a slice of paper here, because I want to show you just how sharp it can get. Now, again, mind you, this is not out of the box, but out of the box was pretty razor sharp. And let me actually turn off my fan, so that way I won't get paper shards going everywhere. That might actually even be a little bit quieter now. Just thought of that. But yeah, so. And also, before I get into the paper cut test, be aware this actually does have a bit of belly on it. Even in the top portion right here, it actually does have a bit of belly, so it's going to make it a better slicer than just your average tanto. I'm barely putting any force behind this, and then I'll do the gripless cut, just it going straight down. So yeah, this knife does have a phenomenal cutting performance, and it can get insanely sharp. So yeah, tanto or not, it's still a phenomenal cutter. I'll show you some of the tip slashing. Here. Got caught on the bottom there. Okay, and there's tip slashing. Let me show you just cutting with the tip. The tip is not quite as great at cutting, but let me also tell you one more thing. The fact that the tip also, for whatever reason, seems to have belly, which, let me take a ruler, kind of use it as a straight edge real quick, just to show you that, yeah, this does have quite a bit of belly for a tanto tip. But yeah, for whatever reason, they decided to put a belly up here too, which it really doesn't need it. But also another thing about it is it actually makes it more difficult to sharpen, because honestly, the belly right here can be a little deceiving and makes you want to sharpen it as if you're sharpening it flat. And it can actually somewhat screw up the angles a little bit. So you do want to curve your hand a little bit even while you're sharpening this thing, regardless of how straight it looks. But the thing is, if you don't get that curve right, it's not going to sharpen properly. But with just how small this is, there's not really a way to curve all that much, while at the same time maintaining it to keep a constant angle on your stone. Well, not constant angle, but while making sure to maintain using the entire surface of the stone. Because I actually could just simply do one portion, and I could easily put a curve in here. The problem is, if I do that one thing and just use, say, the bottom portion, then I'm going to wear a portion down in here, and then this portion right here is going to be lower than up here, and that's really going to jack up my stone, and therefore it's going to jack up the edge of any knife that I go to afterwards. So the top portion of my knife now doesn't have quite as even of an appearance as the edge of the bottom portion of the knife. So just be aware that's a little tricky, and that you may want to invest in maybe a diamond stone for this. So maybe when I go back home, I'll kind of fix that up as best as I can with my diamond stone, because I did not bring that down here. I made sure to leave that one with my mother so that way she could use that stone to sharpen her kitchen knife that I got her. But yeah, so overall, this is a really, really decent knife, which this is actually basically turned into my new TAC knife. For the longest time, this was my TAC knife, and which, by the way, in just the next few days, probably about maybe another week or so, and I'll be getting my refund check coming in, and I'll be able to send this knife and this knife, both of my ZTs, back into Kai USA, because I want them to take this stupid thing apart, fix the screws, hopefully give me stronger screws, so that way I can take this thing apart and do the heck with it what I please. But I also want to send this knife in to get the blade replaced. So yeah, because honestly, this knife I do feel is actually a better TAC knife than this one, and for a couple of reasons. One, on campus, on a college campus, this is going to be a little bit more acceptable. I mean, it's smaller. Sure, it may cause a little bit more of a panic, but think about it. I'm not going to be pulling this thing out unless I'm in trouble. And in trouble as in I'm in a fight or something like that where I need to defend my life. So yeah, this knife is going to be better suited for college. It's also quicker on the draw because this knife is by no means a deep carry. You see about that much coming out of your pocket. This knife is far and above a deep carry. You see nothing on this knife when it's in your pocket. You see a pocket clip, that's about it. So when you pull it out, then you've got to choke up and get to the flipper. So when it's out, yes, this is going to be by far a better TAC knife. But this one's easier to deploy. But since I still need to get the blade replaced on this thing, this has turned into my new TAC knife. But even when I get this knife back, this knife is still probably going to be in my pocket quite a bit for the sole purpose of the Emerson Wave. Now, just comparing it to a real Emerson, which again, mind you, I have no experience with real ones. I'm going off of basically the suggestions of others and what others have told me about real Emersons. From what I've heard, this knife is smoother than a real Emerson. Also, the fit and finish seems to be better than a real Emerson. The insides of this knife are actually polished up just as nicely and also bead blasted to the point where they actually look pretty decent. Whereas a real Emerson, I've heard basically every kind of problem you can possibly imagine. The inside of the knife, Emerson takes absolutely no effort whatsoever to make it look presentable. So it looks like it just came off the factory grinder. I've heard that that the fit and finish on the back end of the blade is just horrible. Like the scales don't line up. The G10 doesn't even look like it was finished properly. I've heard that the alignment is crap. That the lock bars, after about a week of use, will travel so far over to the right that essentially the knife isn't even worth using anymore because it scrapes the other side, and it's just not even worth it at that point. The chisel grind, I've heard sometimes which this one's a little bit more hit or miss. I've heard it before, but I've also heard that some people were lying when they said this. So this can be true. I don't know. Don't completely take my word for it. But I've heard that the chisel grind on a real Emerson sometimes isn't even all that sharp, and because he's cranking out chisel grinds because apparently they're easier to do and he can get out more knives that way. So don't completely take my word on that because I've heard it before, but don't know completely for sure. But this is a traditional V grind, and therefore makes it a lot more appealing to the general public, aka me. I would never buy an Emerson custom. Why? Because I can't stand chisel grinds, and I'm not going to be paying $500 plus to get a chisel ground pocket knife that I'm never going to use. Personally, chisel grinds are more impractical to me. They're only useful in a handful of situations, tactical being one of them. But seriously, how many times do you actually expect to get in a tactical situation where you really need to pull a knife? For the most part, the majority of people that need a pocket knife are of the age to carry guns. Either that, or unfortunately, they're women. Because in today's society, women are getting attacked more and more. They need to carry a knife, but for whatever reason, they don't. Chisel grinds work in that situation because they're a sharp, pointy object. That's about it. I still do think that a V grind would work better. But that's enough about that. But long story short, I've heard that people say that that Kershaw has basically outdone Emerson on his own design. Now, I will say this. I've never actually handled a real Emerson, so I'm not going to be the end-all authority on that, and I'm not going to completely say one way or another that, yes, the Kershaws are better than Emersons, or no, the Emersons are so much better than the Kershaws, because I've never handled them before. This is the only experience with an Emerson knife that I've ever had. And this is probably the closest that I ever will get, because I don't know anybody who has an Emerson. And honestly, I don't plan on getting one, unless basically Emerson is the last great knife that I can ever get, at which point I may look into getting one. But until then, I'm going to stick with the Kershaws, because this is pretty good. I got this for around $50 at Ranger Joe's, which you can find them in Columbus, Georgia. I was basically on my way back to college, just happened to see them while I was heading back, and I was like, hey, why not? So I got this for $50, but you can find it for anywhere from you can probably get it like for $40, tax and shipping included. I think you can get it on Blade HQ for about that price. I think I actually saw it at one point. It went pretty quickly, but I did see it at one point for $35 on Amazon, tax and shipping included. And like I said, $35 for this knife. If you can find it for that cheap, swipe it up quickly. because this is a terrific knife. Get any of the knives in that line, and I can guarantee you 100% that you will not regret it. These are terrific knives. They're very smooth. The lockup is incredible. There is no blade play in any direction on this thing. It is an absolute tank. I've only had to adjust the pivot once, and that was when I was loosening this thing, so that way I could flick it out without a problem. Otherwise, I have never once had to touch the pivot on this thing yet. I had to retouch the pivot on this knife quite a few times, which honestly right now, the pivot needs adjustment. And I haven't even touched this knife probably in a good 5 months. Oh, actually, no, I'd actually have to say about a good 7 to 8 months. That's how long it's been since I've actually pocketed this knife. And it's got blade play. Now, once you tighten up the pivot, no more blade play in any direction. But, yeah, this is already getting blade play in it, and I haven't even touched it in 8 months. Weekend, haven't need to touch it yet. It is incredibly sharp. It's holding that edge very nicely. And I have used this, because I've been testing it out just a little bit. Now, Lord knows I haven't exactly put it through cardboard yet since I'm back in college. But yeah, this knife overall, I am very thoroughly impressed with it. And so even when I get this knife back, after I send it in, I can guarantee you it'll have a hard time kicking this one out of my pocket, because this is a terrific tactical folder, and I really do like it. So good job, Kershaw, collaborating with Emerson. You made a really terrific knife. And as usual, YouTube, stay safe.